I'm not sure.
Okay. Last points. No. Last points. I'm letting people. Last points. It says we're live. I'm just double checking YouTube, and then we are good to go.
Okay. In the meantime, hello everybody who just joined. Welcome.
Hello.
Let's just give Una a minute to double check the stream. Hello. Now it's filling up as well. That's nice.
Okay, so we are live. We are streaming. So hello, folks. Together there are two of us. Me, Una, and Giulia, both organizers of PyLadies Amsterdam. I'm just give you really short house rules, and then the floor would be Giulia. So in case you have how it works right now, you admitted to Zoom. And then we stream it live to YouTube. In case you have any questions, you have two options. Option number one, you can just type it in the chat. So as soon as it plays to answer this question, we're going to pick it up. If you feel you're okay to unmute yourself, you can do that. And basically you can ask question, of course, without interrupting Giulia. Just make sure that Giulia finished the sentence and you're good to go. Okay, and because we have a mix of new folks, our, let's say, loyal workshop attenders, I think it would be really nice to give a just really quickly brief introduction of who we are, what we are doing, and then Giulia, please proceed with your workshop. Good luck.
Yes, thank you. So welcome everybody, and of course also welcome everybody who did not join us before. We are the PyLadies Amsterdam. PyLadies is a global organization that is affiliated with the Python Foundation, and our goal is to promote and give space to women in tech, and specifically women in the Python world, but also to other marginalized genders and gender identities like non-binary people, trans people, and so on. Of course, everybody is welcome, but we just try to give like the speaking position and the speaking space to women and other marginalized genders and gender identities. We do that, so we try to do this promotion focusing on workshops. So we try to keep it very practical. Ideally, we want people to learn something new, of course, but also learn something very practical, like a new practical thing that they ideally can utilize in their professional or personal projects as soon as possible. So that's our goal. That's what we try to do, and we do that once a month typically. And today it's my turn to do it for the month of March. We are going to talk about today. We're going to talk about behavior-driven development in Python, as you all know. Fun topic, interesting topic, I think. But before we get into that, quickly to my person. My name is Giulia. I go by she/her pronouns, and I am with the PyLadies for almost a year now. I think I joined like somewhere in Q2 last year. There we go. And that was like me joining was exactly or pretty much 1 year after my first workshop for the PyLadies. So it's number 2 for me today. I work as a tech lead and lead data engineer at Objective Platform, which is a marketing measurement company that is based in Amsterdam. I work here for, I think, 2.5 years. It's going towards 3 years now, I think. Time flies. And that then adds up to like a grand total of, I think, like 5 years of experience or something like that with like Python, machine learning, data engineering, that sort of stuff. But I think that's. I'm from Germany originally, in case anybody was wondering. I think that's it about me. If there are no other questions, we can, I think, move on to the workshop. As I said already, and as you are probably all aware, we're going to talk today about behavior-driven development in Python. We're specifically going to talk about, like, first off, what is behavior-driven development? I think it is a somewhat well-known framework by now, but probably not everybody is aware, especially people who are maybe a bit more from a data analytics background instead of a software engineering background. But then we're also going to look into some best practices about how to implement behavior-driven development. We are going to also look into how to specifically do behavior-driven development in Python, specifically in terms of frameworks. What can you use? How can you use it? And we're going to get our hands dirty, and hopefully by the end you will be like quite familiar, like at least had a good introduction with one of the more or most popular BDD frameworks in Python. And yeah, hopefully you can then write amazing test specifications in your professional and personal projects, and yeah, utilize the power of BDD. Yeah, so getting into it, we're going to start with a short round of setup just to get it out of the way. I think the code is going to be quite easy. The instructions are going to be quite straightforward, just to make sure that everybody is going to be able to later participate in the actual exercises that we're going to have. Then we're going to talk about what is TDD. What is BDD? What does it mean? Like, where does it come from? What's the focus? What are the priorities? And how does it compare to other testing frameworks? We're going to introduce Gherkin as the natural language in which we produce our test specifications. We're going to discuss some best practices, and later on we are going to utilize Gherkin ourselves. So you're going to, if you're not familiar yet, you're going to learn a new language basically and use it immediately. But I think especially the foundations of Gherkin are very quick to pick up. So I don't think it's going to be very difficult. And exactly, you're going to write your own test specifications at the end of part 1. Part 2, we're actually going to look into the frameworks that we have for Python to implement BDD. We are going to focus on Behave, which is the most commonly used framework. We are going to quickly talk about some others as well, but of course also in the interest of time and also in the interest of this being an introduction and not a full deep dive into all the possibilities, we are going to focus on one framework, which I think is also going to be very accessible to newcomers. And then we are going to implement our test specifications that we have written at the end of part 1 in Behave. I'm saying here, or PyTest BDD. Of course, you can, if you are already familiar with it, you are free to use it as well. But in my tutorial, basically, or in the tutorial that we're going to look at, we're going to focus on the implementations or the functionality of Behave specifically. Exactly, and then ideally, of course, you can run your tests and you can see that your code works now. In the last part, we're going to go a little bit deeper into how we can specify tests, or how we can write Gherkin specifications, how we can write a bit more advanced given when then statements. I've here listed like a few, like let's say medium advanced techniques, how we can make our code, our tests, our specifications more practical, a bit more robust, a bit more maintainable, and then of course also how to use that in our actual Behave implementation. Exactly. So that's what we're going to look at in the last part, and that should pretty much enable you to handle or to use BDD and specifically Behave for, I think, many use cases that you will encounter in the wild, so to speak. Exactly. So the goals of this workshop I have pretty much alluded to already. But ideally, in the end, you should be able to understand what BDD is, of course, and understand why it's nice, why it can be quite useful in many contexts. Ideally, you should be able to specify the behavior and really understand the behavior of your application in Gherkin before you start writing tests. Of course, that's the idea of behavior-driven development. Ideally, we don't want to develop first and then define the behavior, but really define the behavior first and then start development. And then, of course, we want to also be able to validate the behavior of our code as we're writing it. So first we define what we expect, and then we build our code until the expected behavior actually comes to be, and until all our, as you will later see, all our features are successfully implemented. And lastly, if you can be like an advocate for BDD in your organization, it would be, of course, great, should you choose to do so. I personally think that it's a very valuable tool that probably a lot of organizations can benefit from. I know at least that the organization that I'm in greatly benefits from it. So I'm a fan, and maybe if at the end of this workshop you're also a fan, then I would hope that you can be an advocate for this sort of development. Okay.
Okay. Quick thing. Yeah, you're not alone. There are more to us who love BD. We have a question in the meantime. Question is about, are we going to take a look at behavior with Playwright?
No, I don't think so. So we will be looking at like behave, PyTest BDD, and quickly take a look at Radish, but that's it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Like maybe, so as I said, this is going to be an introduction. It's very thinkable that there will be at some point like a deep dive to go into like more frameworks, more advanced use cases and that sort of stuff. But for today, this is not going to be planned. Okay, setup. I think we can do that quite quickly. Oh, there was, I think, a link underlying. No, I think I think now you see the top bar, but that's maybe not a problem. Exactly.
Yeah, we see setup. Go to the GitHub repo for this project, but I also copied the link to the repo to the chat and also to the chat on YouTube.
Perfect. Because then I can just, I think, go through it quite quickly. So if you just clone this repository, create your virtual environment in your preferred way, for example, in the displayed way, and then you can verify that everything went well and that everything is running by just running behave. That's a command that you're going to become, of course, more familiar with over the next about 1.5 hours. Here, a little bit of a modification, qo test.txt. I'm just adding that to not spoil anything, just to keep the actual output of the command a bit hidden, or the most part of it. And then solution/features is going to be the features that we're going to run. And then afterwards, you can remove the test file again. This is just to validate that everything works. If you see all features passed or anything like that, or like something comparable to that, then that everything went well. I will leave you to do that. Like, I think if there are like any questions, feel free to raise them. Otherwise, I would maybe hang on for just 2-3 minutes before I continue, while you guys get set up, just to save a little bit of time afterwards, so that we ideally can dive right in when we get to the actual exercises.
Yeah, good idea. And just a side note, for those who are working on Windows machine and doesn't use, for example, Linux installed on Windows, then the command source when being activated can look slightly different for you. So in this case, just Google quickly.
That is true. I was a bit wondering also in the README if I should, write it separately for different systems. But I was like thinking, okay, I think probably people will be able to do it. And if there are questions, of course, Google is your friend, but also I am your friend in that case. Like, feel free to drop a question in the chat if you encounter any problems. Just like another minute or so, and then I think we can continue.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't see like that any problem was being raised. So then I would just continue to. I'm not sure why this happens. Now you see VS Code, I think, right? Like, it's not intended. Yeah. Now, that's a bit strange. Yeah. Now you saw the spoilers already. It's unfortunate. Okay, then it's a bit strange, but then unfortunately we're going to have to do it like this. So when I click slideshow, it switches to the other screen.
So far it's Visual Studio Code. That's at least what I see, and I guess that's the same that I see on the stream.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a bit. Yeah, that's a bit strange. Like when I click here slideshow, it switches over to the other screen. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure, but maybe it's not a big problem. Then it's not full screen, but I think as long as you can see. But now I added so many nice animations that now you won't be able to see. It's okay. But it could be worse, I think. Okay. So I hope everybody like got set up, like everything went well. As I said, like if there are problems, also feel free to drop a message in the chat, and then we can take a look together what we can do. But for now, let's take a look at what is BDD. So the foundational idea of BDD was derived from test-driven development. So I think that is probably also a term that most people are going to be familiar with. But just for people who maybe are not, test-driven development, the basic idea is that I want to write my test beforehand, before I write my code. I want to really outline how my code is supposed to work, how my code is, what my code is supposed to do, before I write the code. So I want to make my assertions about the behavior, I would say, first, but then and then write the code later. The idea there is also that if I can write tests about what I'm about to do, if I can make these kinds of assertions, that shows to me and shows also to others in a certain way that I have really understood what I'm about to do, so that I really understand the requirements here, that I really understand the way forward, as opposed to starting figuring it out as I go, and then just kind of like making it up as I go, which often leads to like a bit suboptimal code compared to code that is achievable, or compared to the code quality that is achievable if I really as precisely as possible know what I want to do before I do it. One problem that was raised that people have encountered, let's say, when it comes to TDD, is that it is too much focused on the technical implementation, that it is too much looking at how the code behaves in technical terms. So, for example, that like some kind of connection to a database is made, that connection sends a particular query maybe to that database or something like that. But that, for the developers of behavior-driven development, was not ideal. Instead of having these like overly technical specifications and maybe also chasing the code coverage in some cases, the idea was more to really focus on how the application is going to behave, what behavior it's going to be exhibiting from the user perspective. So really from the user side, what do they expect? Then what do they do? And then what happens? That is the philosophy behind, in very simple terms, the philosophy behind behavior-driven development. And as such, it is very much intended to also include stakeholders, like non-technical stakeholders. As you will see in just a few moments, the way test specifications are written in Gherkin is really a way of expressing requirements and expressing expected behavior in natural language, such that like the PM maybe, or like whoever is like the relevant and maybe non-technical stakeholder, can really make a statement about, yes, that's what I expect, that is the intended behavior, as opposed to like a unit test, right? Like if I have a unit test that asserts something, and I show that test function maybe, or this test method to a PM, if they are not themselves technical, that is not really going to help them. But the idea is really that that in Gherkin I can express behavior in as in language that is as close as possible to how the user is going to think about the feature that we are about to implement, or what the user is going to expect from the feature that we are about to implement. And this is also going to exactly like serve as a sort of living documentation for my feature, so that really the even in like, I don't know, like a half a year or something, we can go back to our Gherkin test specifications and look at that and understand how my test or how my software is intended to behave and what decisions have been made there in the past. So I think that's quite convenient. Like, gets everybody on the same track, basically on the same line. It's understandable for pretty much everyone in the organization, and yeah, it just facilitates communication, like across levels, across responsibilities, and also across time. I think in a very structured way. And yeah, it leads to a lot of, ideally, it should lead to a lot of clarity for essentially everybody involved. If you look at how that's different from certain other frameworks, yeah, I kind of alluded to it already, how that's different from test-driven development, like what you see there on the left, TDD. Yeah, it's typically really owned by developers. Like it has often a too technical, is a bit too technical in nature and in implementation for a non-technical stakeholder to understand, which can, yeah, like make communication about what I'm about to test really difficult. And the focus is sometimes arguably wrongly on implementational details. Like a few minutes ago, I mentioned an example that I maybe write a unit test that some connection to some database is established, and then some SQL queries may be sent to that database, which writing a test about that is of course not inherently wrong, but like the let's say the more hardcore proponents, if you will, of BDD would say, yeah, that's not very useful, because that's not what the user in the end cares about. Like, if that's like what kind of connection is established, if a connection is established as long as the user sees their items or their numbers in whatever context you are in that moment, as long as the user sees what they expect in the end, that's enough, that's good, that's what we want. So BDD, and that's then also the difference a bit between BDD and acceptance test driven development, like ATDD, which is a bit in the middle there, is really the focus on user behavior, and then ideally in natural language expressed in a way so that also, let's say, as I put it here, so that business stakeholders can also understand, validate, and also give feedback on the test specifications that I've just written. Another framework that is now not listed here is the test last development, TLD framework. I found this bit in a small article written by John Arundel for Bitfield Consulting. And just to read the excerpt there, any idiot could implement a behavior that's already designed and specified in detail by a clear, readable set of tests. I got into programming because I like a challenge, and there's no greater challenge than trying to write a function while simultaneously trying to work out what it should do. That's of course a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, a bit satirical way of displaying maybe the attitude that some developers have, that like, I kind of know what I want to do. Let me just write my code, and then testing and stuff, I can do it later. I want to figure it out as I go. Yeah, it's of course that's one way of doing things. Some people would argue that it's not an ideal way of doing things, and hopefully also at the end of this workshop you have a great alternative to test last development. And I would actually recommend, like, so if you have access to the slides, you can find them on in the repository, to take a look at the full the article that I have linked it there on the slide. It's quite a fun read, and it's it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek satirical way of looking at of like this test last mindset. Anyhow, that's so far that's it for now for what BDD really is about. I hope the point was kind of clear, came kind of across. Of course, feel free to drop any questions that you might have in the chat. Actually, do we have any questions so far? Because then I would otherwise go to the actual Gherkin part. Appears not exactly. So then I will move on to the next part. Exactly. So you have heard me now talk a bit about how the behavior that the user expects is going to be implemented in natural language, so that, yeah, as I said, business stakeholders, testers, pretty much everyone involved, even if they're non-technical, can validate the testing steps that I have there. And the natural language that this is written in is this language called Gherkin that you see now on screen. So on the right side, you see a snippet from a Gherkin feature file, which you will see in more detail a bit later. And of course, this is also a very simple use case, but like this is here to basically show you like the basic structure, which this Gherkin language can take and this feature file can take. So I have basically my feature login, could be of course any feature, and then I have certain scenarios that I want to test. So here you see successful login, but it could also be scenario unsuccessful login, or scenario maybe create new user or password forgotten, like depending on, of course, what kind of scenarios I want to cover in my testing and in this login screen. Depends, of course, on what I consider to be the login screen and whatnot. And then every scenario will have, or most every scenario, I would say, will have or will consist of these three parts: a given statement, when statement, and a then statement. So here you see given the users on the login page, that establishes a context for the operation to take place in. A when statement, in this case, when they enter valid credentials. So that's basically when they do something or when something happens. And then they should see their dashboard. So then something happens. What happens then? Typically, there is then like what is behind this then statement. There is some kind of assertion, at like an assert statement that you are probably already familiar from, let's say, more regular or more traditional testing suites. Exactly, and that's ideally how we would like to express the behavior of our feature, of our application. And of course, as you can probably see, that is fundamentally readable by everyone. Like whether I show this to a developer, whether I show this to a business stakeholder, whether I show this to the tester or anybody, they all should be able to read this, understand this, give feedback on this, and either agree to it or not agree to it, or also 3, 4, 5 months down the line, take a look here and understand what decision has been taken in the past. Exactly. So the basic building blocks of Gherkin, you have already seen them, but here just one more time, as like in the schematic, we have a feature at the top of our file. That's just a way to group basically our scenarios, or like, of course, in a sensible way. So we want to make scenarios that are sensible for our feature. In our example just now, that was the login screen. Then we want to test or specify the behavior, to speak in like proper BDD terms. We want to specify the behavior of our feature in different scenarios. The one example that you just saw was, what was it? Successful login, I think, right? Yes, there we go, successful login. But then scenario 2 could be, as I said, unsuccessful login, password forgotten, sign up, anything like that, basically. And then we have given, when, then statements, typically for all of these scenarios. Of course, these given, when, then statements, they can be they can be reused basically across different scenarios. So maybe I can say, okay, given some context, when A happens, then I expect something, but then in scenario 2, I can have the same context, but then when B happens, then I expect something else. So of course, these scenarios are like you can how to say you can reuse them across different. So these give when then blocks, you can reuse them across different scenarios, exactly. And then, as we will maybe see in like a few minutes, when we get a bit more practical, you can also connect multiple given when then statements with keywords like and or but. I think and is a bit more common, but is more like the keyword but is a bit more just for readability. Does not really make a technical difference, just for readability. But for example, I could say, if I quickly go back to this example, so given the users on the login page, and then maybe some additional conditions, I can say given the users on the login page and the user connects from a machine in Germany or something like that. Then I have two given statements. So conceptually, that's the same as saying given the users on the login page, given the user connects from a machine in Germany. But to keep it like in this natural language way, like in this way that is easily readable, we can say given the users on the login page and some other given statement, which is then identical in the later implementation. But that's something we will get to in a few minutes.
There is a quick question.
Yeah.
So it's like switch case?
Is it like switch case? No, I would say it's not necessarily like switch case. Like it's not the switch case. I don't think we have that in Python. But if I understand your question correctly, I would rather say this is like a more like a list of steps. So as you will see in part 2 actually. So when I have like a given statement, like given the users on the login page, this is connected to some logic that is going to be executed before the when statement. Without worrying right now what the when statement is, let's just think for a moment about the given statement. So I can say given something is the case, and then this something is the case, it has some logic behind it. That, as I said, in part 2, you will see the actual implementation of this. And now if I say given something is the case and something else is the case, that basically just tells, well, behave in the end, like the Python framework, it tells behave to first execute the logic next to the given statement. So first do this setup step, and then, so given first, and then execute the second setup step. Is that answering your question?
Yeah, let's see. The person who asked the question, tell us.
Okay. Yeah. Like, I hope it helps. Okay, I see the question now as well, but yeah, feel free to come back to me later if that did not answer your question.
There is an extension to that, so we can connect different scenarios.
Well, it depends on what you mean by connect. So scenarios themselves are distinct, but different scenarios can use the same given when then statements. So I can say scenario successful login, given the users on the login page, something, and then on the next scenario unsuccessful login, given it will still be given the users on the login page, and then something else happens. So that is what I mean when I say these given when then statements, they can be reused across different scenarios. If that is what you mean by connecting scenarios, then yes.
Okay.
What you cannot do, or at least I'm not aware of any way to do this, is like where scenarios like build on top of each other. But that would be like a bit of a, in my opinion, a bit strange use case for a strange usage of BDD. If I want to say, so feature login, scenario successful login, some stuff, and then some other scenario that somehow builds on top of the first scenario, so requires the first scenario to have run, to be in some state, and then no, actually, scratch that. That is actually possible. But I would say that's a little bit of a too advanced use case for at the very least for part 1 of this workshop. So if there's like more interest about this, I will maybe come back to that in part 3 of the workshop. But
yes.
I see.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah. Let's continue.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, just to quickly summarize, what is the advantages of, or what are some advantages of BDD? So one is, of course, collaboration. If everybody speaks the same language, that's obviously helpful for collaboration and communication. People really know what to expect because they could read how the application is going to behave in very plain and very natural language. Living documentation, of course, extremely convenient because like if 3 months down the line I wonder, hey, how is this supposed to behave, and then I need to look at the code, but then I'm not sure, okay, who wrote this? Did they maybe make a mistake? A bit strange. Of course, you could also write like just regular old documentation, but I personally think if you have the process of writing documentation as part of your development process, or as part of writing your testing specifications, and B, if you are essentially forced to keep your documentation up to date simply by your documentation being part of your tests, I think that is a very good way to keep your documentation always up to date and always consistent with the actual behavior that you are actually expecting. Exactly, readable by everyone. Already talked about this, and yes, also very important point. It encourages people to really focus on value. So to really focus on what the user expects and what the user can get out of their the application, out of the software, instead of certain implementational details that are maybe just not relevant to the user. But that brings us to some pitfalls in BDD, like some common problems that people may encounter when they try to implement and work with BDD. Number one is writing tests, not behavior. This kind of alludes to what I was just saying before. We don't want to specify that there are some, that the behavior fulfills certain arbitrary implementational details, but we really want to focus on what the user expects out of the application. Over detailed steps, I think that's also quite self-explanatory. That the setup or the action that the user takes is like some it should not contain the connotation of some implementation detail of how the user is going to behave. The user has an action in mind that they want to take, and that should be reflected in the when statement, not the how, basically how they take that action. Not involving business stakeholders. If you basically write BDD just by or if you write feature files in Gherkin just by yourself, then I think you are going to miss. I still think it can be helpful and valuable to just understand for yourself what you're about to do, but I think you are losing a lot of the value actually if you don't involve anybody from the business side of things. Duplicate or unmaintainable scenarios, I think that's also quite self-explanatory. You should, of course, structure your scenarios in such a way that they are relatively self-contained. That also alludes a little bit to the question that we just had. You can, of course, make certain exceptions to that, or structure your scenarios in a bit more complicated way, if that is something that is warranted by your use case, but that is, of course, to be decided on a case-by-case basis. And then also using Gherkin for everything. There are, of course, applications that are very technical, purely internal. Maybe you don't need to have a behavior specified for all of the applications that you're running internally. I still think it can, so when I say behavior that the user expects, please don't make the mistake of thinking the user is just the end user, like the consumer at the end, like really the person who pays for my software. It can very well be some other API maybe, or it could be an internal user. That's all fine, so that these can still be users, but just be mindful of what actually is going to be Gherkin at the end, or what actually needs to be Gherkin, and what is better covered by some regular unit tests that maybe I can write a little bit more quickly and don't need to involve a lot of stakeholders. Okay, that's that. I think now it's time for the first part of the first exercise. I thought it would be a nice idea for us to take a look at some scenarios, like pre-written scenarios, and then just like have people, I don't know, maybe guess or maybe write in the chat what they think, if that's if it's a good or bad scenario that is written. And then maybe we can discuss a little bit. I would not like make it too long, because we have a bunch of other exercises also to get through. But just to give an idea a little bit about what would constitute good Gherkin and what would constitute bad.
I have a proposal. So we all who are on Zoom, we have reactions, and let's say if it's good Gherkin, just thumbs up, and if it's bad one, I don't know, pick up open mouth, or yeah, I think that's the basic reaction that you have.
Yeah,
so maybe it would be faster in this way. So we will see whether do you think it's a good Gherkin or not, or no.
Yeah. No, that's good. So I was thinking maybe thumbs up, thumbs down. Do we have that in Zoom? I think we have that in Zoom.
We have thumbs up for sure. I guess thumbs down. Yeah, let me check quickly.
Oh yeah, we have it like in reaction. Okay. If you thumbs up on the left, and then you see a more like a, how to say, breadcrumb menu or something
three
like
dots.
that.
3 dots.
Yeah, exactly, the 3 dots. And there you can select thumbs up or whatever else you would like to indicate your reaction to this Gherkin. All right, let's look at the first one. Given I click the login button, when I type my username and password, then I get redirected to the dashboard. What do you think? I will give you like just a few minutes to maybe read it, think about it, why this could be a good scenario, or a good description of a scenario, or why this could be a bad description of a scenario. Yeah, like and then feel free to react accordingly, and maybe even share your impressions in the chat if you would like. I'm just going to give you like a few seconds.
I saw 5 thumbs down so far. 0 positive reactions.
Which is good. So I hope that means you can understand why this Gherkin is not ideal. I also noticed that since this is now not full screen anymore, you can actually see my notes below the screen. Actually, can I remove that? So I kind of spoiled it already. Okay, I can actually remove it. Yeah, but so the idea on why this is not ideal. So of course there is not necessarily a specifically right or specifically wrong answer, but so there are, I would say, two issues with this scenario. There are 2 things that can be improved. On one side, the bigger issue, yeah, I of course type my username and password first, and then I click the login button. You could, of course, say, given I click the login button, when I type the past tense my username and password, but that would be like, that looks strange, that has a very weird feel to it. I would say that is not ideal Gherkin, or like a not very good specification of behavior. What would make more sense is to say, given I type my username and password, or given I provide a correct username or a correct password or something like that, then I click the login button. When I click the login button, then something should happen, right? That would be a bit of a better structure for this scenario. Aside from that, that's maybe the smaller issue, but it's also worth pointing out. I click the login button. That is quite specific in terms of like the thinking about the action. I don't necessarily care about like clicking, or is it a button, or is it something else that I can submit. So it could be it could make more sense to put this like behind more general language. Although that is the smaller issue, I would say the bigger issue is definitely the weird order of operations here. That is the second example. Given the user is not logged in, when they visit the dashboard, then they are redirected to the login page. I see the first thumbs up already. I will give maybe everybody else also to some time to think about it. Just a few seconds. Okay, I see a few thumbs up, which is good. So I would agree that that's a good usage of Gherkin. The order of operation makes sense. The action that is being taken is meaningful to the user. It's not overly specific. It is kept relatively general. Yeah, I would say that's overall quite good. Yeah, very nice.
And it was also on YouTube, also very good from YouTube watchers.
Ah, great. I unfortunately only see the what's happening in Zoom, but kudos to the YouTube people for also participating and for getting it. As I said, there is not necessarily right or wrong, but in my opinion, if you say that's good, then that's right.
Yeah.
Last one.
Sorry,
Oh, sorry.
the previous one was also like unclear and too detailed. So that was the previous one. Okay, sorry for interruption. Please continue.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy that people have a chance also to participate on YouTube. Exactly. Last one. Given I open the app, when I use the search bar to find headphones, then the search results show headphones. Also here, I'm going to give you just a few seconds to take a look, think about it a bit, and feel free to drop your reactions in the chat or in the in just the reactions in Zoom. Okay. So I like the reaction. Very nice. So I see it like thinking face. I see also some thumbs down, or some like maybe people are not quite sure if that's good or bad, which is good because this is intended to be a bit ambiguous. I would say it's not bad. So what's happening is mostly meaningful to user. You could argue that searching for headphones is like a very specific operation, although it is all, like this can be seen as like a specific example of something that I would find. I would say it can make sense depending on the testing context. The somewhat bigger issue I would have with this Gherkin here is the given statement. Given I open the app, yeah, like that's a bit of a trivial context, isn't it? So obviously I need to be able to interact with the application of of whatever kind in some way, so that I can do something. It's like if I put it's like something given I'm connected to the internet or something like that. That is like very, very, very basic, and it's not necessarily directly related to the scenario. We will later on learn some other ways to set up more fundamental backgrounds. Like you saw it already on the agenda, maybe that we're going to talk about backgrounds, where if I open the app, if that's like a meaningful step that your behavior needs to be aware of, although that seems like a little bit too basic, would be a bit more appropriate to instead of having that in a given statement, having that in a background. But of course, what exactly that means and what that entails, we're going to see it in a bit. Okay.
There were also funny conversation going through basically on the YouTube. It was basically a dialogue. The option one was like, yeah, it's good, but use the search bar to technical. Then there are different options how you can wrap your head around it. And then, the option like given the app is open, when search for headphones, then headphones show up in results. So like there are different like options how it could look like.
Okay, yeah, that's nice. I also see now in the Zoom chat. Then the search results include the word headphones in the title or content of the result. Yeah, that is a very that is a more specific way of expressing what the user may expect to see. So that's a very nice alternative for this scenario. So I would say this scenario is better than scenario 1, but worse than scenario 2. Somewhere in the middle. Okay, but not ideal. But I'm happy to see the engagement that people are thinking about how to do this in a better way. But now you don't need to worry about anymore about good or bad scenarios that have been written by somebody else. Now you can write your own Gherkin based on like hypothetical requirements that you're about to get. Yeah, exactly. So I assume that everybody is now ready to use the repository, is now ready to work with it. And if you open this repository, the project repository, you can navigate to a file, workshop features basket.feature. The file there, the file that you then open, it contains already a first scenario. So it contains a header and a first scenario, 1 or 2 scenarios already, just to get you started, to get you a bit of an idea of what you're about to do, basically. But of course, if you prefer to do it from scratch, you can also just delete that file and start from scratch. And then the goal is going to be to add, maybe 2 to 4 scenarios to that file based on the requirements on the following slides. I have like a number of requirements, and of course you are welcome to write as many scenarios as you would like to. Just in the interest of time, probably we'll not have time for everybody to write a scenario for every requirement. But I would say, so these are the requirements that you get now from your imaginary PM, and that you can write, in this case by yourself. Of course, in the real world, ideally this would happen in collaboration, that you can write your scenarios for. I would say maybe 10 to, let's say 10 to 15 minutes, something like that. Will give you some time to write your scenarios. And at the end, of course, if you have any questions, you can ask. But in the end, of course, if you feel comfortable doing so, feel also free to share your scenarios in the chat, so that we can discuss all together, and maybe give feedback, maybe give some discussion, if you would like. But for now, please take 10 to 15 minutes to write 2 to 4 scenarios, or however many you are able and willing to write in the next 10 to 15 minutes.
Just quick thing, if I may, let's focus on 10 minutes for the time being, because if you want further cover other topics as well, so let's keep it to 10.
Okay. Let's say until 1905, I would say. So I just saw a question in the chat about in the basket.features file. Yeah, there's a scenario already with a given statement, and then connected to that given statement is an AND statement. And the question is, can we use AND here, or should we use OR? So in this example, we are connecting two steps of logic, or two logical steps that are going to be happening together. And yeah, so therefore we say, okay, given something is the case, logic step A is executed and logic step B is executed, that sets up our scenario with which we can then proceed into the when statement. So I would say and is here the correct term. I don't think there would be a use for or here. But of course, if I misunderstand the question, then feel free to correct me here. So there was a follow-up question, I think, to the previous question. I'm just going to read that out for everybody. How do we write logical conditions like A and B or C in Gherkin syntax? Can we use brackets to group conditions? As far as I know, you cannot use brackets to group conditions. If you want to, and I think now I maybe understand a bit better your previous question as well. So if you want to like make your scenarios a bit more flexible in that way, so that you have, okay, given like a series of contexts maybe, so given context A or context B or context C or context D, when an action is taken, then I get an output, and maybe, for this scenario, only the context changes every time, but I expect when I take a certain action to always this action have the same output, and that is the behavior that I want to assert. That's would for me fit under the domain of parameterizing scenarios, which is something that we're going to actually look at in part 3 of the workshop. So that's the slightly advanced a bit usage of Gherkin. So I will come back to that question, or we will all together come back to that question, actually. Of course. We have 4 or 5 more minutes. I would. Okay. I would continue. Yeah, in a just in a few seconds. If you would like to share something about what you've written, now would be the time.
Okay, we get already one scenario.
Let's see.
So it's a meeting group chat.
Yeah. I can also read it out for everybody. So it's two scenarios that were shared. First one, see all items in the user basket. Given I'm a logged in customer and I added items to my basket, when I click the basket log button, then I should see all the items and the basket should show a list of each product with price and total. So I think that's like a good scenario. So I think the operations that you're taking are meaningful to the user, and the order of operation is good and meaningful. It's very nice. One point of feedback that I would have here is that the first or that the two then statements are a bit duplicated. So then I should see all the items, and the basket should show a list of each product. ... These two sound very similar to me. So that would maybe something to think about, where it could make more sense to separate the listing or seeing of products and their price. Or it could also just be one then statement. That could also be fine. But of course, like thanks for sharing, like very nice. And of course, it's important to point out that there is not necessarily like a right or wrong. So these are just some quick short feedback ideas. Yeah, maybe let's take a quick look also at the second one. Same item added multiple times to the basket. Given I'm logged in customer and I added the same item multiple times to the basket, when I click the basket log button, then I see the quantity of the item increase instead of being duplicated, and the price should be updated accordingly. Yeah, that makes sense completely. I think that is meaningful to the user. That is a good order of operations. Yeah. Only potential feedback point is maybe to be a little bit more specific, or it could be an idea to maybe talk a bit more about, okay, I have edited it twice or something like that. As a bit of inspiration, by the way, either for now or for later as well, you will see in the workshop folder, you're going to be working in that one. In parallel to that, you will see the solutions folder with a similar basket.features file, where I added some scenarios based on those requirements, that like for inspiration basically, or as suggestions as how you could do it. And there I try to be like a little bit more concrete about, okay, I have this item, it costs this much. When I add this item to the basket, then I expect this number. But like details like that. But I think very nice scenarios. Thank you very much for sharing.
We have the similar one for the first one. So from YouTube, it's eventually scenario and then the question. So scenario, seeing items in basket. Given the customer is logged in, when the customer navigates to their basket, then the customer can see all items currently in their basket. And then comes the question, is it better to use I statements and detail the operation, or it should be more general?
That's a very, very nice question, actually. Also here, of course, no right or wrong answer. I understand that it is best practice, and I would agree with that, because I think it makes it just a little bit nicer, the specifications that you write, is if it's a bit more telling, like a story. So in a way, I would personally prefer, personally, and I understand that it's a bit best practice, to really think about the user, like in like specific terms. When I could say something like when Mike, the customer or something like that is logged in, then when he does this, then he experiences this. So I would prefer this kind of third person, like, this, okay, I'm telling a story about somebody else, kind of. This is what I'm trying to say. But it depends, like what works the best for you. So if you basically say you personally, or also you together with your business stakeholders that you might be working with, that if I say that conjures a little bit of a more vivid image in my head, like a better visualization of this process, by all means, go for it. Like whatever feels better for you is, I would say, the right answer there. This is a very much like a non-answer from my side, but such is the nature of these kind of topics. Well, I hope that it was at least a bit helpful. Okay, thank you everybody for sharing and for asking. If something comes still up, feel free to drop it in the chat, of course, but I would keep going for now. Because now, we've talked about Gherkin, we have talked about our natural language specification for tests. Now comes the Python part of it, basically. So now we want to turn our steps, our given, our when, our then, into executable logic. And for that, we are going to use one of multiple frameworks. Here, that is like an overview over some of the more popular frameworks. We are mainly going to use Behave today. Of course, if you would like to do the implementation with something else, because you're already familiar, feel free to do that as well. But we're going to focus on Behave today. I think that is the most widely used, or to my knowledge, it's the most widely used framework, and one of the most popular frameworks in that regard. PyTest BDD is an alternative to that. It's actually, that particular one is actually more commonly used in my organization where I work, because it just has certain advantages, because it integrates a bit more seamlessly with the rest of the PyTest ecosystem. But then you have also Radish, for example, that is a little bit more covering advanced Gherkin dialects. Of course, there are more alternatives than that. Playwright was recently mentioned, although that I would say doesn't quite fit in with these particular frameworks, but that's a different question. I wouldn't worry too much about that for this introduction. We are mainly going to look at Behave, but the concepts are, I would say, mostly transferable. Like if you understand the basic implementations, it's mostly going to be details that will be different between Behave and PyTest BDD, for example. So let's take a look at how we can actually implement our steps. So the Gherkin that you have just written in the probably basket.feature file, if you stuck with the workshop file that was already provided, that is where you define your scenarios for a particular feature. Typically, you will have one feature per feature file. And typically, those feature files, specifically also in the context of Behave, are going to be in a features folder, right? You see the directory outline on the right-hand side, where project basically represents the root level of your project, whatever you're working on. And then there can be a features file in there that contains in this example, it's login.features. In your exercise, it was the basket.features, or .feature, like singular, only one. But then in parallel to these feature files, you will have a steps folder with the logic implementation, like the Python logic that represents your given when then steps in Python code. And if you are set up like that, if you have defined your feature and your scenarios in your .feature file, and if you have define the associated steps in the login underscore steps, like or whatever underscore steps the Py file. If you just run behave, basically it will execute all your test specifications for you. The output, I think, is going to be quite intuitive, but we're going to see a bit more about that in just a moment and during the next exercise. And of course, there are some modifications to the behave command that you can make, but for the purpose of this introduction, we don't need to worry too much about it. We can just run behave and pass only one argument that is going to be the location of your feature file or files if you have multiple feature files, and that's pretty much going to be it for the usage of behave in this introduction. But now the interesting question is, of course, how do we actually define our steps? So here you see, so on the left-hand side, you see again the scenario, the feature and the scenario that we talked about before. And on the right-hand side, you see a very, very simple example of how these steps could be implemented in a Python module. So at the top, you see, okay, from behave, I just import given when then. I think that's straightforward enough. And then I define my steps, like here given as step implementations on the right hand side, using the associated decorator. So at given, at when, or at then. Actually, this was supposed to be animated, so I apologize that it's now everything at once a bit. But basically, I just use this decorator here at given, for example, and then I use the actual like natural language specification from the feature file as a title, if you will, for this step. So basically, I just copy what is here, paste it to what is here, and that tells behave that this step in the .feature file, this given the users on the login page, this logic is represented by the Python code that has the decorator at given, and then where the title inside the decorator is the users on the login page. And then the step implementation here that you see here, that is basically executing that logic. That can then, of course, be much more complex than it is here. Here is, of course, just one line, but that can be whatever logic needs to be implemented by your particular step. What is also interesting here is that every step implementation receives a context argument. So that is like every single step implementation is going to have that. And this context argument is going to be used to share the state of your scenario across your different steps. So here, for example, the user is on the login page. Just in this example, this logic is going to be represented by the context.page attribute, which is in this example just an arbitrary attribute, going to be set to some arbitrary value, login in this case. And then if I want to access that this attribute, or if basically a later on a when or a then statement builds on top of this attribute, it can be accessed through the context object again. A better example of this, actually, compared to the first implementation here, is actually the second the implementation of the when step. Here I'm setting a authenticated attribute to true, so I'm setting this attribute, and then once I get to the then step, I see that I have now access to this attribute, and I can make assertions about that attribute. That is the purpose of this context argument, which is going to be passed to every step that you have there. One thing that's also worth pointing out is that in this case, all the functions are called like step impulse, so the name of the function is duplicated. That is permissible because they are defined in the context of their respective decorators. However, worth pointing out that if you are using like a formatter, for example, like rough, it is going to complain about that. It's going to say, duplicated function definition, you cannot have it. You would just have to add that to this particular issue to the list of ignored issues for rough, either in your PyProject or TOML or in your config file, wherever that is, or of course for the specific lines in which it occurs. But you also don't necessarily need these functions to be called step implementation. I think it's more common practice to have the name of the function always be the same, and have the let's say actual name or the title of the function be represented as part of the decorator. But that's maybe also a bit of a personal choice, or that you could of course deviate from that. But like, I think that is the more typical practice as you see it here on screen. As an addition to this, if I would have here an and statement, so given the users on the login page and something else is the case, from the perspective of behave, this is just another given statement. So I would then have here, given the user is on the login page, and then below that maybe, or above that, doesn't actually matter where it's defined, but then add given something else is the case. So this connecting word or keyword and that I might use in my Gherkin, it's mainly for the benefit of the user. That it's like different from given, so it's mainly so that the user, the reader, can understand it more clearly. But from the technical point of view, it basically just imitates the keyword that comes before it, which in this case would be a given, but it could be also a when or a then statement if I want to connect them. Exactly. So that's the basic idea on how to transform your or how to implement the steps that you're representing in your feature file in Python logic. As a side note, there also like some additional options that you have when it comes to the feature file. For example, here at the top, you can see that the user story is written right below the feature. That does not impact the behavior of behave at all. That is really also just for the benefit of the user or of the reader, so that they maybe have more documentation in one place. It's just like a description of the feature, basically. That does not think of it like a docstring, maybe. Technically, it is not. It is not interpreted by behave. It's just for the benefit of the reader. Exactly. And feature names and scenario names are also just a way to tell behave how to group steps, but they don't have any technical like technical consequences beyond that, basically. Okay, so now before we go to the actual frameworks or to behave, like before we get into using behave to implement our steps, one question would be, do we even need a BDD framework? So technically the answer is no. So as you see here on screen, you can of course write like some Gherkin or some feature file, and then not use something like behave or PyTest BDD or anything like that, but instead just write regular old testing code, like in the example here. I can maybe say, okay, given some context, and that's my first fixture, when something happens, that's my second fixture maybe, and then my then statement is basically represented by the actual test. I make some assert statement. That's of course okay. Like I can do that. It's not a problem, and it's maybe going to be easier to adopt. Like if an organization just wants to get started with BDD, that could be a nice starting point. But of course, yeah, like. Yeah, this next slide. But of course, using a BDD framework is beneficial for multiple reasons. I think one of the more important ones is that it really forces you to have your feature or your test specifications, your behavioral specifications, be very tightly coupled to your tests. So basically, if you have like some specifications, and you would like to maybe add a new scenario, but that is based on the same given context or anything like that, or you just want to, in general, change the behavior, it more or less forces you to either reuse what you already have in the steps that you already defined, if you're working with behave, for example, or it forces you to update your tests accordingly. So in practice, I would see the risk if you don't use any framework like this. I would see the risk that your feature files, like your also like documentation, like if you use your feature file as part of documentation, and your actual test start to diverge at some point. Of course, people can say, no, we can maintain it together, and that's possible, of course. But in practice, I think that's a very big risk that you have, and that just takes away a lot of the value that you get out of BDD. So for those reasons, I would say if you can use a framework like that, if you really can tightly couple your feature files and your actual step implementations, that is probably preferable. Good. Yes. So that was it for part 2. Now to exercise 2, where you get to actually now implement your specifications that you wrote before. And for this exercise, I would ask you again, of course, to open the workshop repository, and then you can navigate to a workshop features steps basket steps.py file, which already contains an implementation of the first step, basically. So for the scenario that was already part of the feature file that you worked on before, I think the steps for that are already implemented. But of course, you can also start from scratch if you would like. And yeah, then the goal would be to try to implement some of, or maybe even all of the scenarios that you have written in exercise 1. And to exactly, and when you are ready, then to run behave actually. So you see the command here, behave workshop features basket.features basket.feature. You can run that and then see if your tests succeed. And in proper BDD fashion, you can then so once you have written your implementations, you can then start developing the code that is in models.py until your tests actually succeed to like have the real BDD behavior-driven development experience. Yeah, feel of course also free to start from scratch if you would like. Then you can delete the workshop src models.py module or the basket steps.py module. And if you don't want to use the scenarios that you have written before, feel free to go to the solutions features basket.feature and take the scenarios from there. Like if you would like to start with like a clean plate, so to speak. But yeah, also here I would give you like 10 minutes, I would say, for you to maybe implement some steps and start experimenting. And if you would like, share some of your steps afterwards, or ask some questions afterwards. But yeah, I will stop talking now, so please feel free to get to it. Okay, I hope everybody was able to add some steps and ideally do some small implementations that make your test succeed. I didn't see any questions so far, so I assume that means, everything is going swimmingly. If that changes, feel free to drop your questions in the chat during this next part. Because I would be moving on, also looking at the time, we actually don't have that much time left, and we have a whole part to still go through. I will try to not talk so much this time. Exactly. So in part 3, we're going to look at some practical Gherkin features and how to implement them into steps with Behave. So the steps that we just now implemented, or the steps that you've just now seen in the previous part, were of course a little bit simple. In the real world, things can of course be a bit more variable. So you will maybe have a bit more complex logic, you have maybe a bit more edge cases, or you get into situations where you would want to parameterize your steps a little bit, or where you want to maybe use this like just different given statements multiple times, ideally in the same scenario, and have the behavior of the action based on this given statement, and then the expected result be the same. So that is kind of the use case that we were talking a little bit during part 1. We got a question on how you could do that with like OR operators or something like that. So that is something that we're going to take a look at in this part. And to do that, we're going to look at some practical ways to implement that in Gherkin and in Behave. The first little trick that I would like to show you, or the first practical feature, is parameterization of steps. So as you can see on screen right now, I have here 2 different step implementations, like 2 different givens, but it could also be when or then. It works just the same. It's just in this particular case, it's a given state, or it's 2 given statements. And you can see that these given statements are largely the same. So I am viewing the product page for keyboard or mouse, costing a certain amount with a certain amount in stock. So for this, I have written 2 given statements in my feature file, and I have accordingly defined 2 given steps in my Python module. But there is, there can be a more convenient way to do this. So I go to the next slide. You can see that I can replace things like keyboard, things like the price, or the $25.99 in this example, and the number of items in stock with placeholders, like like it looks like string formatters in Python basically, but they are placeholders for my for this Gherkin title. Which are then converted to input arguments for your step implementation. So you can see here, for example, that the keyboard, so the word keyboard between the double quotes, I have replaced that with the curly brackets product name, and have then accordingly added a product name input parameter to my step implementation, so that I can then pick it up during the execution of this given logic. And the same is true for my price and for my stock. Note here that I did add type-ins like string for product name, float for the price, and integer for stock, just for readability and convenience. The behavior of Behave is not actually influenced by these type-ins. If you want to cast something from not being a string but to be a float, you use this this colon F formatter that you see that I have used there for the price parameter, or the colon D formatter that I have used for the stock formatter. That will then convert the whatever was picked up. Whatever this placeholder has picked up will then either be converted to float or to an integer accordingly. And of course, if you don't use any formatter like that, it will just be a string that you then can use in your step. Okay, so that is the parameterization of steps. Now, Similar, but maybe a bit more interesting, is the parameterization of scenarios. And that ties in now with the question that we got during part 1 about, okay, now maybe I want to have multiple given statements connected with like an OR operator, or how you would actually like do that in like a Gherkin kind of way, is with scenario outlines. So as you can see here, I have I've also here a given when then statement, and I have replaced parts of my statements with this how to say, like this smaller than, larger than signs, and then a parameter name in between them. So I have here, for example, given a type customer with a total of amount euros, and the same in the then clause. And then to actually define the values for this scenario, I have an examples table below. So that is like an extra keyword here, examples. So I call this a table, or like this table is then called the examples table, where I have a table where I connect some type value, some amount value, and some expected value in a table that, like, if you are familiar with markdown tables, then I think this will already look quite familiar to you. But exactly, so that is just a way of how I can parameterize a scenario, so that I can basically have a template for a scenario with multiple example specifications. Great. As a bit of an alternative to these scenario outlines, you can also use tables as part of given statements. That is a bit more relevant, like especially if you want to test something maybe that involves also pandas, you know, like if you want to interact in some way with some table, or you want to assert that you get some particular value from some particular table, you can define this table as part of your given statement in the way that you see right now on screen. The definition of the table is the same, just now not under the examples keyword, but instead under the given keyword. And on the right hand side, like if you look here, you can then access that table as part of the context, right? So the context is, as we discussed in the previous part, is going to be passed to every step implementation. And the context of table is then a list, is going to be a list of row objects that are indexable by indexable by name, like this. So here I'm accessing for each row that, you know, I can iterate over those rows. For each row, I'm accessing here the price value, so this value, and the quantity value, so this value, right? So that is basically how I could how I can have like data tables or something like that as part of my given statements, which can be, as I said, quite convenient if I have some kind of collection of data that I want to make the foundation of my test scenario. Now, something else that I was talking about, or that I mentioned a bit earlier already, is the backgrounds. So backgrounds are more general given statements. So basically, if I have like a feature that I want to have, where I want to have a particular given, basically, that is going to be part of, or like a foundation for every scenario for this feature, then I can make that a background. The implementation of that is basically at the top of the feature file, so right below the feature, I can have my background, and I give some kind of name for the background that is going to be similar to the scenario name. This is just for the benefit of the reader, that has no technical meaning. And now I can define given statements as part of my backgrounds. Now, as you can see here, so I have here given a catalog and then some table. Now I can just implement another given step in my step module that carries the same name as you know, as you would typically do for a given statement. So there's essentially, from a behave point of view, there's nothing special about this background. And I can access everything here in the same way as I would expect. So there's really nothing special about this particular given statement. But then the special thing about it is that it is going to be executed at the beginning of each scenario. So just as if you would have that as a given step for all of your scenarios. Just you have to define it only once. That's the convenient part. One thing though that's important to note is that these given steps, or all other given steps for that matter, they will be executed for each scenario individually. So they are not going to share a state. I think for other given steps, that's probably quite intuitive, but for backgrounds, it's important to note that if I spin up a background, maybe I spin up some kind of database or something like that, or a database connection, that will be done individually for each scenario. So they do not share a common state. They are fully separated. Yeah, I think is it clear so far? Any other questions about that? I don't see any other questions, and that's good. So that gives us just enough time to take a look at the third exercise, the advanced syntax or the practical syntax for Gherkin. I would give you here two options. You can pick which one you prefer. The left one is a little bit easier, where I would just ask you to take another look at the steps that you've implemented in exercise 2 and try to make use of some of these features in your steps. A little bit harder is going to be if we if we create a new feature, so a checkout feature. I have prepared the feature file already for you in the workshop features checkout feature file. There I would ask you to write a scenario outline based on the background data that is provided in that file. Then you can implement the actual steps that are needed to execute your scenario outline in the workshop features steps checkout steps.py in that steps module. And then, of course, now that you have specified then the expected behavior, the question is going to be, can you make your test succeed? So for that, you would then again have to take a look at the models.py module, or a new model if you choose to start from scratch. And try to execute your tests and try if you can make them succeed. And if you have any questions about that, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll be quiet and I would give you, we have unfortunately not that much time anymore, but I would give you until 7:55. Then we would do the closure, but I will maybe be around a little bit longer. So if you then still have questions, you can also ask afterwards. Good luck.
There is a question about background. Do you want to answer it now, or do you want to answer it after?
Yeah, no, I will answer it now.
Okay.
I actually started to type just now, but I'm not sure why. Of course, I can also just say it. Yes, so the question is, can we define a background that is shared across multiple features, similar to how a background section works for multiple scenarios within a single feature? So that would then not be a background. So a background is specifically for an individual feature, something like a bigger context that feature needs to work, basically. What you can, of course, do is, so depending on your use case, but you could maybe create a testing database or some other, like something that exists independent of your tests, like just basically completely outside of the feature files. And then have the background of each feature be to make a connection to that database or to that data source or to that file, like whatever kind of object that you have there. But for background specifically, so for the backgrounds, in the Gherkin sense, in the sense that we were just not talking about, that would be feature specific. I hope that answers your question.
I think it's time, Giulia.
Yeah, so looking at the clock, I would have given 30 more seconds, but I think that is also fine to continue now. Yeah, so I hope everybody was able to like ideally, of course, implement a scenario outline and make some of your tests run. If you're still at it, or if you would like to compare your work to maybe something else, feel free to take a look at the solutions folder. There is an example implementation that you can look at and compare your implementation with. If you have any particular questions, you can of course also send me a message either here on Zoom still while the workshop is still running, or otherwise you can reach me on a meetup in the messages as well. Yeah, but I think that concludes our session for today. Thank you all for joining. I appreciate everybody's collaboration and everybody's participation. Thank you for that. I hope you all had fun and you could learn something. Before we go, I have one more announcement from one more thing to share from the PyLadies side. So yeah, that was our March workshop. We are currently organizing another workshop then for April. We are going to look into how to make art with Python and math. So it's going to be, I think, very interesting and very fun. It's going to be a hybrid session, so it's going to be both online and in person, and the details are to follow for that, of course. But please expect another session at the end of April. Okay, thank you, everybody. Yeah, I think that's it from my side. Una, do we have anything else to share?
I think that's it for now. Oh, probably pretty much important information in case you're located in the Netherlands. BDD Amsterdam is going to take place in September, and the call for papers is open until 11th of May. So just keep this in mind. There are a lot of things maybe that you want to share with your colleagues, other folks. So please don't forget about that. So for now, BDD Amsterdam takes place in September, end of September, and call of paper is open until 11th of May. It sounds like a lot of time left, but usually you know how it's happened. You're just on the point of submitting something and the deadline is already passed. So just add this to your agenda, please. And another thing which I want to add, so just from like a personal note about BDD, I found it really, really helpful in setting up proper evaluation systems while working with all this, agentic systems and GenAI powered apps, because that's a sweet spot in finding, let's say, the subject matter expertise brought together with, let's say, the developers experience. So in this case, if you agreed on something, you at least have proof. That's what we discussed. That's how the behavior looks like. That's if we extracting something, for example, from unstructured text, that's what we agreed to be extracted. If it's, let's say, chatbot, this is what I agreed how the query to the user is going to look like. So what I'm trying to say, it's very useful tool in your tool belt. And it's pretty good because you have things basically documented. And I'm not even starting speaking about upcoming changes with the EU AI Act, which required pretty much hardcore documentation for everything. Yeah, I guess that's it from my side.
Yeah, it's an excellent excellent point, actually. Yeah, I think these like, especially what we saw at the end, like scenario outlines, these examples, they are great to validate behavior of all sorts of LLMs, and can also help to inform the LLM's behavior as examples of what it's supposed to do. So it's a great point, actually. Yeah. So I think in the near future with LLMs, agents, and vibe coding, as they say, I think BDD will be a very useful tool in your tool belt, indeed. Thank you.
Yes. Indeed. Okay, so far what I see, we're getting a lot of things from YouTube, from chat. So I think that's conclude our session. So I'm going to stop the stream first, and after that I will shutting down the Zoom session. Okay. So just
Okay.
let me stop the stream for now.